Well, thank you all for being here for our last chapter meeting of 2024. So let's get to it. We got a great show for you tonight. We have several member presentations, including from, let's see, can I remember them all? Lucy and Jimmy. We have one from Kaela. We have one from Maeve, and we have one from Cara. So it's going to be a great show. Let's get to it. And we're recording for longevity, so that's great. Our meetings are always recorded and put on YouTube. If you ever want to hear me talk some more, you can listen to them on replay. But for our chapter business, so we'll be taking a break towards the end of this year to enjoy time with our families in the darkness. But there's plenty of content online at our website, including 2 new articles by Jason. So, woo, Jason! If you ever feel inspired and want to contribute something to our website, please reach out to Grand Strand Publicity, to Catherine, and we'll help you get your content on the web, if it's appropriate. This is not, plants only. All right. So you might have noticed there are sticky notes on your table, and while you're, after you're done eating and while you're paying attention to everyone else who's speaking, I also want you to write some content for us, some suggestions, recap. What did I say? Highlight your favorite memory from 2024. You can give someone a compliment. You just have to write something, and you're going to put it on a sticky note, or you can write it directly on that sheet on the wall over there. And then you're also going to think about 2025. So a suggestion, something you want to see, a field trip, your hot take, like, I don't have a hot take. Someone give me a hot take. Plants are bad. That'd be a hot take that you probably wouldn't be supported. But so yeah, if you wouldn't mind, there should be plenty of pens and sticky notes on your table. If you need more, they're on the walls over there. So we'll appreciate your feedback. And then I just wanted to spend a couple minutes doing a recap. So this might help jog your memory for some of your favorite highlights of 2024. We learned a whole bunch. These are our featured speakers at all of our meetings. And again, you can relive the presentations by watching them on YouTube. So we had a bunch of great speakers who volunteered their time to come talk to us, and we really love that. Yeah, let's give it up for our featured speakers. One of our January field trips to Brook Green Gardens. Wow, great. And if you were attended to one of these events, I want you to give me a loud woo. And we had our seminar with Patrick McMillan in February. We helped install a native plant garden in downtown Conway. Have any of you have you been by to see that garden? Yeah, woo! We had a spring plant sale. A bunch of people helping. Shout out to the volunteers in the plant sale committee. If you volunteer or join the plant sale committee, you do get one of these limited edition yellow t-shirts. So take notes for next year. We had a May plant rescue. Sudi, I think you organized this and saved some Venus flytraps.
Did, and they looked bad for a while, but it's been checked recently, and some of them are living. So.
Woo, living plants. We had our first merchandise with this sticker that was designed by Jesus, and if you'd like to get a copy, let us know, and I'll go grab them from out of my office. They make great stocking stuffers. This is our field trip to Bottle Tree and Francis Marion. That was a great trip. Woo! No one else was there? Yeah. Okay. July, we did a Sea Beach Amaranth survey. Yeah. Sometime over the summer. We did a river paddle,
Yeah.
July. We saw some, what did we see, Cara?
Plymouth Rose Gentian.
Plymouth Rose Gentian. We had a Moore Farms field trip.
Yes.
And big shout out to Moore Farms, who has sponsored our grant program this year. Evan, how many grants did we give out?
And you put it on the spot.
Yeah, sorry. 3 or 4.
Yeah,
So supporting community gardens and initiatives, and we should see them next year, right?
yeah.
So we'll give you more information about that in 2025 once we see those projects come in. We removed some invasive plants. Woo!
Strong women.
Strong women. And most recently, we had a wildflower hike earlier this month at Hobcaw. No takers? It was all the Georgetown folks. Woo! So it was a great year. There's many more memories that I didn't put on there. Thank you all.
Thank you.
If you want to help support what our chapter is doing, help support our grant programs, and if you want to participate in nonprofit giving on Giving Tuesday, which is December 2nd, just kidding, 3rd. It's the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. So just, what is time? Any donations you make to our chapter as a nonprofit, they're nonprofit, so I don't know, write off on your taxes. Talk to your accountant, I'm not sure. But 50% of those donations will go to our Lewis Ocean Bay Education Fund, which is what our chapter has set up to support stuff going on at Lewis Ocean Bay Heritage Preserve. So, yeah. And then I also want to do a big shout out to the volunteers who helped make all of our activities happen this year. So, our education folks, Maeve, do you have anything to say about your education folks?
I owe you an email. Also, Jason in education.
Oh yeah, sorry. Whoever made these slides, dock their pay.
On it.
Tierney, do you have anything to say about the plant sale folks?
Plant sale folks rock!
Yeah.
Wildly successful plant sales, we had counters at the fall one and we had almost 500 people show up.
Woo!
We can't do that without our committee and our volunteers, so thank you so much.
Yeah. Communication. Catherine, you have anything to say?
Thank you. Thanks to everybody who helps out with the emails and the website and so we
Yeah, communicating.
Yeah.
All right. And then I'd like to recognize our chapter board. So there's not a lot of perks to being on our board, if we're being honest. You get to you have to hear us talk. We have to talk about the ideas, the future of our chapter, big picture stuff. So we are super appreciative of our board members who spend their time planning and thinking about what we can do as a chapter. So since I have a little gift to give to all of our board members. So as I call your name, you can come up and get your little gift, your one perk of being a board member. So let's see. Evan. Yay, Evan. Bring this super quick. Sudi. Yay, Sudi. Oh wait,
I don't, there's one this year. I've got them.
we're gonna take a photo real quick. Oh no. Jimmy. So how do I read these names? Oh no, we lost them. Babs. Yay. Oh wait, Jimmy, you got Babs.
Don't say bad.
Yeah. All right. And board members, we'll take a photo afterwards. We gotta get to our presentations. Tierney. Woo, Tierney. Woo, who has also served as our state treasurer, so helping us do good financing. So
I haven't checked when you were.
Maeve. So, the chapter gift to this, or chapter board gift this year is, a new book called Serviceberry, by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Yes?
I don't have, I have gifts for the education, if we're doing awards.
Yeah. All right, there's a perk on being the education committee.
The education committee, I have homemade beauty berry jelly, but there's also beauty berry jelly for everyone on the table if anyone would like to sample it.
These perks are adding up. So our board gift is this book, Serviceberry. It's by the author of Breaking Sweetgrass, which is a great nature memoir. And this book is about abundance and reciprocity in the natural world. And on the back, it says all flourishing as usual. So I think this will be a great holiday read for our board members who have helped our chapter to flourish this year. So one,
Tell us we have homework.
yes, there'll be a quiz in January. All right. That's enough clapping, I think. So let's get to our featured speakers. And our first is James and Lucy. James, Jimothy.
Who the heck is James?
So my mom made a mistake, made me James, but my name is really Jimmy.
Okay. All right.
Slides, or we're just gonna like.
You're just gonna have to click.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah. One day we'll get
No, that's.
we'll get innovative.
Depending where we
All
start.
right.
All right. I'm gonna kick it off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lucy. This is Jimmy, AKA James. And we are going to talk about a project that we did in our neighborhood, in our nativehood. And Jimmy came up with the title, Fulfilling Needs with Natives. So take it away.
So we started out, our community is somewhat small, and they had heard that we were both in the horticulture field. So by the time of the next meeting after we moved, they already knew that they wanted us to help them with like planting. So last year, the HOA decided finally the mailbox, I guess they planted around it when the community started like 15 years ago. And so they asked us for input, you know, what can we, what should we do? How do we make the area nicer? So when we met with some of the board members, we started talking about it, and we kind of talked about the mailbox area, and then there's kind of common area around it.
Yeah, so once we started talking about that, like with a lot of things for me, we were united by spite. And where this came from was I was talking to one of the members as I was getting my mail. You know, I'm 35 going on like 75, and you know, get these kids off my lawn type of mentality. So posted at our pond are these no fishing signs. And whether that is something that one of the other grouchy neighbors put, or that's like a legitimate thing, I'm not sure. But where the issue came is people would walk behind one of the homeowners' houses and go through all the back of our houses, which, okay, but if you trip and fall, then I get sued, and like you're trespassing on my lawn. So how do we like get people not to do that? So this is, again, it started from spite. How do we like maybe not get sued by neighborhood kids that tell us to take a hike for asking them to please not be in our backyards? So I said, well, what if we planted some roses? And they had to like go through this like horrible obstacle course of pain. They're like, well, maybe not that, but like, what if we could go? And this was my neighbor, not even me saying this. What if we could make this like a protected area? And I'm like, well, I don't think we can get any kind of sort of official status like that, but we could go and look into certified wildlife habitat. And that's where that conversation started, talking and planting native plants, and how can we go and do this?
So, you know, you can't make it like a protected like laws or anything. But you can go through the National Wildlife Federation and become a certified wildlife habitat. So you could do that with your backyard. We did that with the common area in our community. there's basic requirements
We'll
and
go-
what's that?
We'll go into those.
Which we'll go into. And, but also there's cool signs and they love that too. And the cool signs are really cool. So anyway, between all this, they were sold. They said, let's do it.
So what do you need to become a certified wildlife habitat? It's not as daunting as it may sound. And you can find us on their website, but you need to have food sources, 3 minimum. And that can be things like having insects, leaf litter, native plants. So a lot of that stuff may already exist where you live. You need to have a water source, 1 minimum. So if you have a pond, a bird bath, the ocean, some of those things are, I mean, in our case, we were right on a pond. We had that done. A cover source, so places for wildlife to be able to hide. And so another minimum 2, pond, a rock pile, mature trees. And there's a whole slew of different things that you can do. These are just some that I put as examples here that are on their page. Places to raise young, again, another 2 minimum, pond, mature trees, host plants. And then sustainable practices, and they have a whole list. There's 2 minimums, so that can be things like invasive removal, adding more native plants, reducing lawn, using mulch, limiting your chemical use. So there are a lot of things that you may already be doing. You might be like, I could get, certified wildlife habitat right now at my own house, and you may be able to reduce small things to go and do that.
So we had a lot of what you needed already. And we just had to add in some things to become the certified wildlife habitat. We came up with a design for the plantings, and it was very rough design. I'm not a landscape architect. It was circulated through the HOA board, and other members of the community checked it out. And no one had objections. So, we were good to go.
Okay, I was a little trigger happy there because I thought his design was on that page. But before we show you the design, we just made a basic plant list. And we're working on a shoestring budget here because even though we both are at Brookgreen where, if we're gonna do a big project, we're gonna have so many plants, we're working on restrictions within the budget that we have. So we just chose a few plants. And we wanted things that were going to provide food, cover, but still be ornamental and of course low maintenance, because how are you going to sell this to your community if it's like, oh, you're gonna have to be pruning it twice a year, you're gonna have to water it every other day. Nobody wants to do that. No one has time. It's not going to be successful. So we picked sable minor, the dwarf palmetto. We picked Cephalanthus occidentalis or buttonbush, and Rosa palustris, the swamp rose. And we don't have a ton of them, and we just, again, small plant palette to do that. And we got most of these from Bottle Tree Gardening. So really good price, really good plants. We had to supplement with some more sable minor because we bought out everything that Dwight had with ones from another nursery, which was a little bit more expensive. But this is the plan that Jimmy made, showing the different plants that we used on
This
the
is
page.
my crude plan. Basically, it's a satellite image of the area. And we came up with surrounding the whole pond, all the accessible sides. There's woods on that far side. But surrounding the pond with just those 3 types of plants, and we didn't want them to go crazy. And so it was kind of spaced out. We had the palmettos in 6 different spots or 7 different spots. And basically it was easy, just having it spaced out. Another cool thing was that if people want to walk around with their fishing poles, they really can't, because now they're gonna have to like walk around the palmetto and get a little bit of water, walk around the road. There's the button bushes in their way, they gotta go and make it hard for them too.
But that would take time because they need to grow.
Yeah. So we got together with it was about 4 families. I would say there's probably about 9 people or so. And it's a 27 home community. So it is nice and small. We we showed them how to do it. You know, that's something I've learned from being in the horticulture industry, like instructing people who don't know. So we made sure we did that, and then everybody was planting. It went great. You know, we put down the straw as our mulch, some pine straw. And we set them up with watering. We were like, okay, we did all this planning and, you know, planting and everything with you guys. And we kind of like, you know, let them do the watering, but they developed a system. They had this like bucket that they would, because there are no hoses around, and they were like, you know, good for you guys. So that was that got it in the ground and got it going.
So this is what it looked like. Again, it is not a huge planting and
Very
things will
small.
grow. So you can probably see the sable minor, the dwarf palmetto, most obviously, the more coarser chunks that you see. There's a close-up of them. You can also see in kind of the background, the mature trees that exist beyond there. This is the Rosa palustris, or the swamp rose. And most of these things did survive. We did have one cephalanthus go down, which isn't bad. That's the button bush. And these no fishing signs already existed, but we were able to go and put these certified wildlife habitat signs under them, and hopefully that would give a little more indication to people of why they shouldn't fish, so you don't hopefully have lines stuck that are going to go and get caught on ducks and be eaten, all that other good stuff.
They love the signs. They bought 4 signs. I guess we saved them so much on plants, they went all out on signs.
Yes.
There's a couple different ones you can get too, not just that one.
Yes. So with the finishing touches, once everything was done, again, the signs were put on and we created this small habitat, which is great. We did this probably in April or March. And it still looks pretty good now. Obviously, plants are going to take a little while to grow. You may have heard
Slow.
sleep, creep, leap. First year is kind of slow. Second year, it's a little bit more as it goes, and then the third year leap. So we'll see if that happens. But it was great being able to educate our community more on native plants, being able to have a meeting with the community to explain what we were doing, why this is something that we thought would help to further beautify the pond, which was, you know, the main thing. Spite is just like secondary or tertiary, but help to make a nicer area, give a benefit to wildlife, and just keep pushing that native agenda. And that's us. So.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And now let's turn it over to our featured speaker, Kaela.
So I kind of accidentally overlapped a little bit with Lucy and Jimmy's, and I originally made this this little PowerPoint for like a really long, like 45-minute talk. So I'm gonna kind of flip through like really fast. But basically, as we're approaching winter, I wanted to kind of talk about, you know, we all love native plants, but I want to kind of go into why they're important besides just us loving plants, like why they're important to like the greater scheme of things. So talking about that and what we can do to kind of prep for the winter. So as we have wildlife that kind of need a little help, how we can prep our garden to be kind to the wildlife during the winter. Do I need to click? There we go. Okay. So this is just a little brief summary of what I was going to go through. Like what wildlife needs, what it needs, how to provide it, why winter is even difficult for wildlife, which we can kind of imagine, and coping strategies and different things we can specifically do to prep for the winter. And of course, I'm not an expert, so please call me out if I get anything wrong. So what is wildlife? So when I think about wildlife, I think of a little bit more than just the animals. I think more about every living thing that kind of interacts in a system. And so when we think about our backyards, everything that we see in nature is interconnected. And so if we save one animal, that impact is greater than just saving that one animal. They all interact and need each other. I don't know, how many of you have read Doug Tallamy's book, Bringing Nature Home? Yeah. So I really liked, he brought up this concept, like the Jenga concept. So instead of just a keystone species, removing one species, everything collapse. Sometimes it's a little bit more like Jenga. So if you're playing a game of Jenga and you remove one brick, everything else left over gets a little bit more important. And as you remove more and more and more, it gets a little bit more delicate. And so if you remove one more thing, everything could crash. So as you remove things from our ecosystem, everything that's left, it becomes more and more important. So it's more than just one thing sometimes that can crash everything down. Every little piece is important. So before I go into that, does anybody want to like shout out, like what does wildlife need? Food, yep. Shelter. It's another one. Water. And the last one is just a way to raise their young. So if you think about just having wildlife in your yard, I mean, you can support the wildlife, but they also need a way to reproduce or you won't have any more wildlife. You can't just support something, you have to give it away to be able to reproduce as well, to have it for long term. So food, water, cover, and a means to raise their young. So I'm going to kind of skip over this really quickly. This is just again from the National Wildlife Federation. Lucy and Jimmy talked about this a little bit. I liked this graphic because it kind of shows the differences in 2 yards. One is a conventional yard on the right, where it doesn't really support a lot of organisms. You use a lot of chemicals, use a lot of gas. It's just a lot of work to maintain it, and it's not really supporting very much. Whereas a yard on the left may produce a lot more. And there's some really cool facts on there. So for one example, like oaks support over 500 species of butterflies and moths. So there's a lot of things that a native yard can support. So one is water. I made this slide to be kind of accessible for really any kind of household. So whether you live in an apartment or you have like an 80-acre farm, any kind of situation you have, you can kind of make little steps to provide for the wildlife in your little area. Like if all you have is a tiny little balcony, you can still maybe have a little bee cup or a little bird bath, or maybe a bird bath with stones in it so the bees can get to it without, getting drowned in the water. Or you can upgrade to a tiny little 20-gallon pond. That was my first step in my yard. It's just a little liner from Lowe's, add a couple native plants. And within the first summer, I had dragonfly larvae living in there, eating all the mosquitoes, and then coming out into dragonflies. So there's little bitty steps, whichever kind of situation you have, there's like little bitty things you can do to kind of support wildlife. And one of those, water. So whichever way you do it, it kind of helps them a little bit. I keep watching the time to make sure I don't go over. Another one is cover. So it's really important to have ways that your wildlife can kind of hide out and stay protected from predators, or even to have a place to kind of raise their young without having, predators attacking them. And one great way to do that, especially for the winter, is to have a mix of deciduous and evergreen trees. If you have evergreens, they don't lose their leaves, and so it can kind of prolong the amount of cover that they can have in their area. So it's a good mix to have some deciduous and some evergreen. And we'll get to the berries in the picture too, and how those can be important as well. So last one is raising young. So I really like this. I'll give you all a second to read it because it's really cute. It's really cute. I think that's from Bird and Moon. They have, Bird and Moon. They have really, really cute nature comics. But I really like that a lot. So first is for birds. You can provide a lot of ways for birds to raise their young, and we'll get to kind of how they feed the young as well. So one, you can have a lot of natural places for them to raise their young. You can have trees, you can have dense bushes, different places for them to hide and kind of create a nest. You can also do bird boxes, but a caveat there, you have to make sure that you keep them clean. Because if you don't clean them out, they can, have pathogens or different parasites and things. So you have to make sure that they get clean throughout the year. So if you think about it, if there's a bird nest out in a tree, it'll fall out eventually, or they'll just build a new nest. Whereas in a box, it might hold all that stuff in. So if you do a bird box, which is a great artificial way to do it, you have to make sure that it's able to be cleaned really well. And then also having supplies to make nests. We'll get into that a little bit as well. Having a slightly messy yard, so there's kind of debris around for them to use to make their nests. which I didn't really think about much until I, really thought about it. Another is I have a couple on bees. So about 30% of bees, give or take, I could be a little off on that, nest in cavities. And so a lot of people, raise your hand if you've ever seen like a little bee house, little bee box. Yeah. So those are great, again, an artificial way to give bees that nest in cavities somewhere to nest. But another thing is they can also hold pathogens over a long period of time. So that is something you'd have to either switch out the little tubes. I've seen online where some people will put paper straws in the tube so that they can be easily switched out. But if you want to have a natural way to do that, you can leave the stems of wildflowers and things like that in your yard over the winter. Even if it looks a little messy, a lot of those bees will burrow into those and actually make a nest in those. And if you see here, here's an example of one that there's a nest inside and they've capped it with leaves. So that's one way you can tell if there's actually a nest in there, which is pretty cool. And here's like a progression. I think this is called bee bread, I think, kind of like food they'll put in there for the larvae when they hatch. And then here's one that's actually pupated. And then the larvae. And then really quickly, most bees will actually nest in the ground. So being cognizant of having little patches of just dirt in your yard and allowing bees to kind of nest underground. So a lot of them will overwinter. So if you have like a ground nesting bee, it's not always like a yellow jacket or something like that. Most bees will nest in the ground. So just kind of being aware of that as well. Especially bumblebees, I believe. And then butterflies and moths, I'll get to that a little bit in a second as well. So food is very important. So really quickly, I'm just going to go through some different types of native plants you can use to provide food in your garden. One is our beautyberry. We've got the beautyberry jam over there. So beautyberries are beautiful, wonderful, wonderful plants, but they'll also hold their berries kind of late into the winter. And so they'll provide a food source for birds and other, I think mammals will eat them as well. So that's a really good one. Another one, we actually have a lot of species of hawthorn trees. I can't remember exactly which one I have a picture of here, but hawthorns have gorgeous flowers, which if you're looking for something with an effect of a Bradford pear without the horribleness of a Bradford pear, a hawthorn, or the smelliness, but a hawthorn will give you really nice blooms for your pollinators and they look really nice, but then they'll also give you these fruits here for the birds and mammals as well. Super fast story. I used to work at a plant nursery, and before I knew a lot about native plants, a gentleman came in with a gallon-sized jug full of these berries he said he found in the woods and ate about a pound of them. And I was really concerned that this man was going to die because he wanted us to identify what plant it was that he ate all the berries from because he had no idea. So I was really, really worried. And that was one of my first introductions into identifying a native plant and figuring out what it was. And luckily I did find out what it was and that it wasn't poisonous and he never came back. So I'm glad I figured out what it was and didn't worry about him. But he ate a lot of hawthorn berries. So yeah, don't eat random berries in the woods, but edible to people and the birds. Another one is American holly. This one has a bunch of different punches. One, it's evergreen, so it gives a lot of good cover in the winter. Also very pretty. And has berries that'll prolong into the winter. So very, very good source of food there. So instead of just berries, there's also seeds if you think about a bird feeder, which again are great to have, a great artificial way to feed your birds. But you can also provide seeds in your garden naturally as well. One really good one is the purple coneflower, Echinacea purpurea. Again, if you leave those seed heads, it'll give the birds a chance to come and forage those seeds. But it'll also give, once they break off, a place for your native bees or other insects to nest in or hide in. Another one is blue stem. I think this one's a maritime blue stem, but I just think they're a beautiful grass. They have those nice puffy tops, and you see them a lot on roadsides. And I've seen birds land on them and pull the seeds out. So, I mean, kind of can look a little messy sometimes, but I think they're a beautiful grass that gives them a chance to have some seeds as well. And here's some quick other ones: black-eyed Susans, red chokeberry, eastern red cedar, wax myrtle, and blueberries. Am I doing okay on time? Am I going over? I'm good? Okay. I'm trying to go fast. So really fast, insects and invertebrates. So really quickly, nectar is a lot of what our butterflies and moths as adults will eat, versus if you have a host plant, that's what their babies eat. That's what the caterpillars eat. So just like humans, human babies need milk, whereas adults have a different diet. So it's very important that you provide both in your garden. So one is milkweed. So I've got 3 different species here. We have Asclepias humistrata, which is the pink one. I took that at Lewis Ocean Bay, I believe. Asclepias perennis, which is one of the most important ones on the coast here. I took this one at Brook Green. And then I think I just got this one off Google. This is the classic Asclepias tuberosa. So there's a lot of different species here in South Carolina, and they all like different habitat. So if you don't have luck with one species, try something different that fits your yard. Another one is passion flower. The Gulf fritillary butterfly uses this as a host, along with the variegated fritillary and the zebra longwings. So we have 2 different species of passion flower. So we've got the purple passion flower here and the yellow passion flower there. Those are our 2 native species. And on one side, we have the Gulf fritillary butterfly, which that one came out in my yard. So it's really, really, really cool. And then on the very far side is its caterpillar. I think I'm almost done. This is a plant that's not quite as easy to find. I think some native nurseries will have it, but it's not quite as easy. But this one also has a double punch. We have the berries for birds and mammals, and you have, well, actually a 3 punch. So it's got flowers for your butterflies and nectar consuming organisms. And then it's also a host plant for the spice bush swallowtail. This is one of my favorites because I think that the caterpillar looks like the Pokemon Caterpie. I just think that's really, really cute. And then this one's one of the easiest beginner host plants ever. Our black swallowtail caterpillars can eat a lot of different plants in the carrot family. So if you have a hard time finding native host plants, there's some great alternatives that are not invasive, and there's usually things that you have in your edible garden anyway. So if you do want to eat these things, consider having one that's kind of a sacrificial plant for your caterpillars. So parsley, fennel, I think carrot, Queen Anne's lace here. I didn't know that's not native. It's not native, but they will host on it. But if you do want to have a native plant, the yellow one here is Zizia aurea. That is our golden Alexander. That's the native host for them. But you have these adorable little caterpillars that'll get all over it and turn into these beautiful butterflies. Almost done, I promise. And lastly, if you could plant anything, oak trees. They're beautiful, they're amazing, they take forever to grow. So worth it, and they can host over 500 different species of moths and caterpillars. So here's a little example of some of the things that it can support, you know, with the acorns, with the insects, all of these different things it can provide. So why care about insects? Anybody want to guess? Why do we care? Yes, things eat insects. So even if you love butterflies, love caterpillars, birds have to eat too. So providing, you know, if you want to take care of your butterflies, you have to be okay with some of them getting eaten. And I think, I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but I read one quote that said that, does everybody know chickadees? Little bitty birds, that one nest of chickadee birds can eat like 3,000 or more caterpillars just to fledge. Is that about right? Yeah. So if you imagine like going out in your yard, how many bugs you can find, and they need that amount for one nest of those tiny, that's an adult that big. So you can imagine how small the babies are. So having as many caterpillars in your yard as possible is like so important for your birds. Okay, almost done. Prepping for winter. So wildlife has a hard time in winter because it's cold, there's not a lot of food. A lot of them will leave, some of them will hibernate, and some will just stick it out. So a lot of our prep is providing a place for them to stick it out and providing food. So it's a lot of things that I've already talked about. So again, migration, hibernation, or they push through. So one thing is, if you can, I know a lot of HOAs don't allow it, but if you can provide some sort of messy, brushy area, and I wouldn't recommend this close to your house or near where you have dogs, but if you have a space to provide a little bit of brushy area, it's great for things to hide out. whether it's winter or just hiding from predators, or just having some place to stay. Brush is a great way for our wildlife to have somewhere to hide. Again, leaving our old stems, we already talked about that. And leaving the leaves. So this is our gray hair streak. They actually will lay their eggs in the leaves and they will overwinter as an egg. Another example is our lunar moth. These guys will pupate and then the leaves will fall off the tree and they will spend the winter as a cocoon in the leaf litter. So they're a beautiful, beautiful moth. And this is a morning cloak butterfly. They will actually sometimes overwinter as a butterfly in the leaves. So all three life stages, egg, chrysalis, some I guess will do caterpillar stage, and then adult in the leaf litter. Another one is our lightning bugs. Do any of y'all remember seeing more lightning bugs than you see now?
Yeah.
Yep. They spend a lot of time in the leaf litter, especially they're young. One of the reasons they do that is one, it provides habitat, but it also keeps moisture. So if you don't have a leaf layer or something like that, or grass that's just a little bit taller, maybe a teeny bit taller, it doesn't hold a lot of moisture. So a lot of insects don't have a good environment to live in. So if you can, I know it's not possible to keep all of your leaves in your yard, especially if you're an HOA, but if you can use it as like mulch or keep a small pile in your yard, just a little patch of leaves can provide a lot of habitat for a lot of overwintering wildlife. So, and you can also spend your winter planning for next year. So I'll skip over a couple of things, and this is the last thing I had. I think it's funny. That's all I got. Sorry, I went a little long, but.
Thank you so much, Kaela. You're fine. Now's your snack break, everybody. Snack break's over. All right, let's welcome our next featured speaker, Maeve.
All right, hey everybody. So for my talk, I want to be clear that I am going to be taking off my Maeve education chair hat and putting on a new hat because I'm going to talk about designing and installing native plant gardens and how that is something that I hope to do as part of the small business that I'm starting that I will tell you more about. But really my goal here is, as the education chair, I do so much outreach and I'll talk to HOAs and community groups. And when people are like, okay, I'm sold, I'm all in on native plants, then they'll be like, now what? Where do I buy native plants? How do I get started? And I don't want people to, you know, jump on the bandwagon and then feel stuck. So that is really my hope for this presentation. If you are thinking of adding or expanding native plants in your yard or in your community. Hopefully this gives you some tools. And I'm not really gonna talk too much about like part sun, part shade, and all those details. I'm just gonna tell you the story of installing a new native plant bed at my house and what my process was like for that and the mistakes I made and the things I learned. So hopefully that is helpful for you too. So this is sort of the before. I had already done a little bit of native plant landscaping in this front area of my house already. On the left, I've got some large flower coreopsis, a beautyberry, a Carolina allspice. I've got some Yopon and some Walters viburnum. But I also have like some Mexican petunias that were there when I moved in and some other things that I wanted to deal with. And as I tell the story of installing this garden, I'm going to take you through these steps. And these are all steps where I would love to help people. And that can be anything from just like looking at your yard, doing an assessment, like identifying if you have any invasive species there, helping you pick the best part of your yard to put a native plant garden in, and then selecting the appropriate plants and doing a nice design, a nice aesthetic layout, sourcing those plants where you get native plants. Our plant sale is a great place to start. Site prep, installation, and then maintenance. So this is the design that I put together for the front of my house. Again, I am not a landscape architect. This is not to scale, but this was just to help me in thinking like, what species do I want and how am I going to arrange them so that it's nice and the spacing is appropriate. And so, you know, I just used kind of like dots, but I wanted to alternate colors. I wanted to make sure things were blooming at different times of year. And the species that I chose, I really was like kind of filtering by a few criteria. Because if I go back and show you just our front porch, my thought was this is the entrance to my house. So I want it to be one of the showier parts of my yard. I also want to be able to still have a view, like if I'm sitting on the front porch. So, and also my house is south facing, so I had full sun. So I was like, yes, I can go all in color, floral, which is great because in landscaping my house, which when I first moved in only had invasive species. So I had to take out all those Bradford pears and mimosas and then basically start from scratch. And so I started with trees, then I added shrubs, and I'm finally now at the phase where I can add all the fun florals. So that was my kind of site selection. That was my plant selection. Now I had to do the site prep, or rather, Davey had to do the site prep. Is this my video one? Yes, it is. Okay. So I've been reading books about regenerative landscaping that is sustainable, that gives back to the earth. And one of like the key principles behind that is using human power, in this case, husband power, instead of fossil fuel power. So I got this thing called the sod kicker. I mean, I've used a few different approaches in my yard over the years. Like I have one area where I was sort of, it's in the backyard, so there was more tolerance for this, where I first stopped mowing, created an enormous weed problem, just things in the seed bank that I wasn't looking to grow. So then kind of weed whacked everything down, put down cardboard, did that sheet mulching, deep layer of wood chips. So that's like a longer term option. In this case, front yard kind of needed it to look good, faster, had basically like nice solid turf that worked with that kind of tool. So that's what we did, or Davey did. Rolling up that sod, got it out of there. And then I guess an even earlier step to all of these, I'm trying to go in chronological order, but an earlier step was actually doing a soil test. I dug up some soil, actually brought it to our plant sale, got it tested, Clemson Extension. Just seemed like a good idea to add some organic matter. So I got some compost, and that we started mixing in just like a thin layer, spreading over the top, not even really tilling it in. It'll work its way in. And then we sourced the plants, got a bunch of plants. This is not just for my front yard, this is for another project I'll tell you about. And then the layout part, because as we know, we can do these designs in our head or on paper, and then you get out there and you start moving plants around and you'll see there's a lot of like stepping back and kind of looking and thinking about it and adjusting. And so what I was going for, again, I told you, like, I was really filtering for full sun plants, things that aren't going to get more than like 3 to 4 feet high, so we still have that view. I love it by the front porch because like if I'm sitting out there, I want to be able to watch all the bees and the butterflies and enjoy that. So I had a dwarf Theopon, a Walter's viburnum. I got another dwarf Theopon sort of for symmetry, and also to have just a little bit of like, again, evergreen foundation, things people expect. in the winter when the herbaceous stuff dies back. I've also got some Eragrostis spectabilis, that purple love grass. That is sort of spaced evenly. That's also going to provide like a little bit of winter texture and interest. And then, of course, you gotta plant everything. Should be a video too. Ugh. There we go. So getting all the plants in the ground. This is a great time of year to do it. I know spring is when we are excited to garden, but fall is really great to let plants establish. And I'm sure a lot of y'all are even more, have more expertise about planting and gardening, but this has been a great learning process for me, because when I first started with my yard, I was doing everything, you know, just as time and resources allowed, and then problems would creep up on me. I'd start a new bed, create a vacuum into which weeds would grow. So this is really, you know, an intentional approach of kind of doing an install versus just kind of puttering around, which was, you know, my typical gardening up until now. All right, so grand reveal, this is that before, here's after. Another consideration that went into this, and this is like not even aesthetic or ecologically driven, which, you know, the ecology is really like my primary goal with this garden, but also trying to make my life a little easier. This used to be a really difficult, annoying spot to mow. I would have to get behind there. I'm the one mowing my lawn. So now I've got this straight line that I can follow, make my life a little easier. That's just another view. And like Lucy said, you know, sleep, creep, leap, like this is gonna take a little time to establish and really fill in and start to flower, but I'm so excited to see what it looks like in the spring. This is just another view from the very front of my yard. The first project I put in with my yard, because my lot is wedge shaped, was what I call my tree triangle. And so I started trees, then shrubs. I started putting in a little more of an understory here. So I've got leavenworth sedge and I've got slender wood oats. So I think those are gonna pair really nicely. Oh, and I selected these trees. Again, everything was sort of based off of, you know, our local ecology, our native plants, but then I live in Sockasty, so I know my soils are sort of like floodplain terrace, a little bit of like, you know, swampiness. So I've got willow oak, overcupped oak, 2 oak species that I know do well in that sort of like bottomland hardwood forest. I think that's sort of the original natural setting of my house and development. And then the red maple actually recruited naturally into my yard. So I just moved it there and I got a free tree. So that was the project that I just put in this past weekend at my house. And then coming up for over Thanksgiving weekend, my in-laws have very kindly volunteered their house as an experiment for me.
Oh.
But it was really fun to work with them to sort of, you know, in kind of a consultation process, help them design a native plant garden for a section of their yard. Because with my project, I kind of had a vision. I knew what I was going for. With them, I got to talk through all these questions that I wanted to share with you if you're like thinking, I'd like to put native plants in my yard, but I don't know what considerations I should be thinking about. So, I mean, the first question can just be like, what are your goals? For me, with that garden, my primary goal is to add native plants for the critters. But you could also want to do it just to feel connected to like your sense of place, like South Carolina. You could want to do it more for aesthetic beauty, lots of reasons. For my in-laws, when I talked them through this, they were like, we love the birds. They love to watch the birds. So I was like, okay, let's make choices about where the garden is going to be and what's going to go in it based on you attracting birds to your yard and getting to see them. The aesthetic part was kind of fun because what's your, you know, what do you want it to look like? And you were like, I don't know. So I had to think of all these adjectives for them to be like, yeah or no. So do you want it to be like really bold or really subtle? Do you want it to be like more natural or more like, I don't know, kind of modern looking? And the thing that I sort of pulled out of them is my father-in-law really loves a British reality show that's like a garden design competition. And so he likes the look of a traditional English garden. And I was like, okay, how do I recreate that with native plants? And I was like, what even makes something have that English garden feel? And I think it's sort of cozy. It's very like neat edges, and it has, you know, that sort of like secret garden path feeling. Now that is like that's a lot of plants to plant that densely, and both in terms of like budget and labor, we were like, how do we make this doable? So I'm doing a circular shaped garden, and we're gonna see how this turns out. It's gonna be like, you know, sort of bordered by plants with an arbor to be an opening, like an entrance into it, and then open in the center. So you're like in the garden without it having to take up a big space or like wind through an area. So I was looking for sort of like mounding plants, dense plants, things that have that English garden feel. I talked to them like what annoys you in your yard. And so again, we're going in an area that they find annoying to mow. It's a low spot that their yard actually fully flooded during Hurricane Florence and all the grass died. And it's a low spot that still will puddle during extremely heavy rain. And so we're going with a lot of native wetland plants in there. And that's like just one of their least favorite yard spots. So we're going to try to make it more natural. So I don't really have photos of that one yet, but I would love to share that with you all in the future. And like I said, my goal with my garden is really just to have plants for the critters, adding habitat into my yard. And so these are photos from my yard this past summer and fall. Other areas where I've added those native plants, and it's so amazing. Like when you plant it, they will come. And it's so fun to watch. And I really want to share that with everyone. So this is the small business that I'm starting. It will be both a native plant nursery, a small backyard nursery where I'll be growing in my backyard, but not selling from my house. I'll be selling at our local farmers markets and also doing online orders and pickups. I'll be growing a mix of homegrown, locally collected plants along with plants that I'm gonna source from other growers in the region. Really, my goal here is just to make native plants available and accessible. I plan to be at our next plant sale, but I'd love if, you know, there could be more opportunities for folks in our area to get their hands on plants. And then I'll also be offering like habitat garden design, and I will help with anything from you're just not sure where to put things all the way up to installation. And I think, you know, I'm not taking on like landscaping, like I'm not going to become a landscaper, but I'd love to help folks like in their homes, or if your HOA is in need of a community pollinator garden, I'd love to work on those kind of projects. And I'm also hoping to incorporate my passion for art, maybe with like interpretive sign design, or also decorative sign design, or maybe some native plant swag. So I know this is a little bit of a shameless plug, I'm sorry, but I'm so excited about it, and I'm so excited to share it with all of you. A website is still forthcoming, but it is not too soon to reach out to me if you are interested or have questions for me. Right now, I have an email and an Instagram, and I'll have other ways to get in touch with me in the future, but I just wanted to put it out there, and I think that's all I had.
Questions about your name. I just saw the species, the snail seed species that has the seed has the, explain that. I can't remember the.
Good question. I didn't properly introduce my name. So I really didn't think too hard about this. I just love snails, but I tried to think of a native plant that has a snail connection, and Carolina snail seed is a lovely native plant. It's a climbing vine. It has a bright red berry, and the seeds look like a little foiled snail shell. And we definitely have them in our area. I think we saw it at
Wait,
Hudson when we did the.
I had no idea it even existed. You introduced it to me.
Yeah.
Was it Pepulus or has it been changed?
It's been changed. It used to be like cocculus, and now it's Nephroia caroliniana, I think. Yeah.
Oh.
All right.
All right, gang, the fun's not over yet, and I know you might be getting restless. And we'll also need a little bit of space on the table for our next craft. So if you'd like to walk up and throw your food away or throw your plates away, you can. Luke will also be walking around with a trash can if you'd like curbside delivery. Grab some more snacks. We've got another another presentation and plans of the month, so we'll go fast.
You don't have enough scissors in your office, do you?
I do. Yeah. Yeah, that was great. Good foresight. They say that. It's so hard. I was supposed to help last and then I got sick. I was like, I'm so sorry. I'll tell Dave. I don't know if she wants me to start. I'll wait till she comes back. I'm scared. So you're fine. You don't want to. Which is not worked out.
Should I wait for people to sit? Give them a minute.
Yeah, it's so cute. Your slides are so cute.
Canva.
Yeah.
And then I just, at the last second, I was like, we should use our color. But this.
You're good.
All right, guys, I want to be respectful of your time and get you out of here by 7:30, but it's probably not going to happen. But you will get to go home with a handmade gift that you're going to make yourself. So you get to make it and take it. So, in like Maeve, I'm also going to start a small business because now I have time to do it. And it will be a craft business. If you guys see me at meetings, I'm always doing something with my hands because I can't sit still. So I'm annoying and I will crochet during class or whatever it is. But my business is going to be called Shits and Giggles. It's going to be fun little gifts for people. And we're going to do one of them today. Okay. So we're going to do a craft along. It's going to be fun. I promise. This isn't working. It's okay. So what you're making today, you will be making a felt flower magnet. There's one on each of your tables so you can kind of see what we're going to make, but it doesn't have to look like the one that's on your table. You get to be super creative and make it whatever colors you want. Okay. And guess what? You don't have to have a lot of skills. This is going to be real easy. Anybody can do it. So what you need for this craft is felt, a button, a needle and thread, magnet, and scissors. That's it. And we have all of that for you today. What I've already done to make this a little easier and to save a little bit of time, I used my Cricut Maker to cut your flower shapes out of felt. I would not have done these by hand. That would have been a huge pain in the butt. So they're all cut with a die cut machine. I have pre-threaded needles for you with my own 2 hands, just to save us some time. Plus, that's a pain, right? Nobody wants to thread needles. And because how many times have you gone to sew a button and you have your needle and thread ready to go and you stick it in and it doesn't go through the buttonhole? I tested all of them. They work. Hand tested every button. Okay. So it should be easy. It should be fun. I'm going to give you a list of what you need to come up and grab. And then you can come up in an orderly fashion. There's plenty. Don't fight anybody, but you can come up and get what you need. So what you're gonna need is you're gonna need assorted flowers. You can see on those little magnets that there are different layers. You can layer as many as you want, but remember you have to sew through them. So I've been using anywhere from 3 to 5, but if you only want to do 2, that's perfectly fine. We have large shapes, medium shapes, and small shapes. So you can kind of layer them up and figure out what you want. You will need a button, okay? And then a threaded needle with the thread color of your choice. And then one of these little magnets. So come get your supplies. Do it, do it. Do it, do it, come on.
Mine is gonna be our color. We can do 2 sides.
Yeah, yeah. Mess it up.
And I cut it out to make what I thought was gonna be the blotter in my secretary.
No tangling ideas.
Don't be shy.
Taking them out.
There you go. Don't be too picky.
And then whatever I got in my script and sewing it on, and that's gonna come.
Beautiful.
They look like pictures from the BBC.
I want to see them.
I need
Pictures.
Yeah. These are pretty fun. I mean, they're so simple to make, but like they're so cute and you can get so creative with them. I mean, all of them on the different tables are completely different. Like
So are you with a press or just by hand?
die cut machine.
Yeah.
So like a Cricut.
Yeah, oh, okay, because I have hand cuts, like, small square.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get her up here so
And I
you
don't
don't
get
get
it.
Yeah, it might work if it's, yeah, this worked pretty well. I was literally cutting flowers all day, just sending sheets through. But because I only had one fabric pad for it, but it worked really well. I was actually surprised. I told Victoria it was the first time I used my rotary on my Cricut because I hadn't used it.
Yes, I don't have a Cricut because I'm afraid
It's addictive.
Yes, and I've already got two social students.
Yeah.
The third one, they're going to the college to take to Court's house to study. But never mind.
Yeah.
Because that's. Yeah. Yeah. That makes it all the more worthy. So that's a good idea.
That's a good thing.
I know.
Oh, yeah. Like some of those secret gas.
Yeah. But it'll take 2 minutes.
I can understand.
Amy already knows what All right, once you have your supplies, this is super easy. You've probably already figured it out. You're gonna layer your flowers in however you want them. I'm gonna go through this and then you guys can take all the time. I'll stay. You guys we won't leave. You're gonna lay your flowers and then layer your button on top. When you sew your button on, be sure you sew through all the layers of your flowers. And you don't have to make it like, you do not have to go over it 10 times. You're not sewing a button on a shirt. Do it simple. You only need a couple stitches. It's real easy, okay? And then once you have it, that magnet has a self-adhesive side. So you just attach it to the back and press it for 10 seconds and you're good to go. You're done. That's all you gotta do. Sounds so easy. How are you? Yeah.
I'm doing well. So how could we request something for you? Is it something I'm being asked for? So how long do you leave the stems? When in the spring is it safe to take the stems down?
It depends, because our weather's been so, but when I've read, it's, once your temperatures are consistently staying out of like frost temperatures, when new green. Yes, yes.
If anybody needs another slide, if you need me to go back or anything, just let me know.
Above freezing, you start having growth come up, and you start seeing things leave the stems, is probably pretty good.
Okay. That's because I was asked, like, you gotta give us a date we can push on.
Oh.
But I'm like,
No, you just have to watch it. Yeah. It's a sign.
I mean, I'm gonna go.
Just be watching and waiting and just checking the temperature.
I work with people, they gotta have very good contact.
Right.
Up there. I'll never heard. Yeah, I was running so late. I was hoping it would be enough.
I feel that. I did it every day. Next one, you can just stitch your shirt.
My friend Katie was my student. We were actually like, we did a cleanup with her all over it. We were talking to her on and another just listening. And she
But I
was
saw the
like,
lights and stuff.
"What's the best dog you've ever known?"
Are you doing the same thing I am?
And I had to take it.
Yes, gotta be perfect. Yes, totally. This is gonna live on my refrigerator. It's gonna be pretty.
Yeah, you don't really have to. Whoa, it's there. Oh, I like that. We had the same times.
I just got a call.
I'm done. Otherwise, I have to do that. It's like a little crush.
I switched up.
Yeah, I'm done. All right, if anybody has questions, let me know, but we're gonna do plant of the month. But for those of you who made your magnet, good job. You did it. You're awesome. They're beautiful. We want to see them before you leave. And I'm gonna turn it over to Tierney for plant of the month.
I said, is everybody ready to play some fun? I know we've had a lot of presentations, so I appreciate everyone's patience and just keep working on your cute little flowers while we go for plant of the month. I decided plant of the month. I try to do something that is striking to me at the time, or a new plant that I've learned about or is flowering during that month. So for this month, I picked a plant that is new to me and was sold by Native Plants to the People at our last plant sale. And that is Elliott's aster. Symphyotrichum elliotti. The obvious name is Elliott's aster. Marsh American aster is another name that I've seen for it. This is a really great native plant for a lot of reasons. One is that it is blooming right now in November. So this is a great plant for late pollinators to get that last chance at their nectar for the winter. It is a full sun plant, so it can take that full beating sun. It will take a little bit of shade, but if you plant it in too much shade, it gets floppy. Because this is a tall mama. This guy gets 5 feet tall. Oh. This baby also likes wetter soils. So this is really great for those shallow depressions in your yard that puddle up, for your rain gardens, for your roadside ditch edges, for your pond edges. I had to look this up myself, so all of our asters are no longer in the genus Aster. They decided to reserve the genus Aster for Europe. And all of our asters were actually split into 4 different genera back in 1994. I thought it was way more recent than that. So Symphyotrichum is one of those. It just means hairs coming together. And probably was used by the man who described this genus for clusters of hairs, or the clusters of hairs that are on the seeds. So we'll see that. Elliotti is named after Stephen Eliot, who was actually a resident of South Carolina in the 1800s. He did quite a lot for the community. It took me a while to figure this out because there was a lot of conflicting information. But this gentleman seems to be the most likely candidate for why this was named, because he was a professor of natural history and botany at the South Carolina Medical School back in the 1800s. So this plant was named after him. Lots of cool information about that guy if you want to Google him later. Keep clicking the wrong thing. Distribution, this is an endemic plant to the southeastern United States. It is not found growing naturally anywhere else in the world. Fairly limited range, only in the coastal plain, going from Virginia down to the southern tip of Florida and over to Louisiana. Now you can see that the open squares mean that it's relatively rare, and squares with dots is uncommon, and solid squares are common. So it is really only common in Central and North Florida, but it does grow uncommonly naturally in the South Carolina coastal plain. It likes wet environments, just like I said, for your gardens. It can be found in bogs and swamps and roadside ditches and other wet habitats.
I'll just add one thing about the plant. My experience, it is a deer favorite.
Is it? Okay. Deer are wildlife that need food. It is really, really showy. It has really large panicles of these really beautiful pinkish lavender flowers. It is compound flowers. So this is not one flower. This is hundreds of flowers. Each one of these petals is actually what's called a ray flower. And each one of these in the center is what's called a disc flower. Just like any other aster, just like coreopsis, just like your Joe Pye weeds, et cetera, et cetera. Key identifying feature of this plant is that the leaves alternate on the stem as opposed to being opposite each other. They alternate as they go up, and the leaves clasp around the stem. So there is no leaf stem, which is called a petiole. It actually wraps itself around and hugs that stem. These are the seeds, or at least I hope they're the seeds, because this was really hard to find pictures of, and this came from eBay, so we're just gonna hope. But they're very, very tiny. So they need to be surface sown. They need sunlight to germinate. They also need cold, moist stratification for at least 90 days. So you can either sow them now in the ground, or you can do a artificial stratification in your fridge. And one of the most important things about this plant is that it is a pollinator magnet. I found an article written by Patrick McMillan at the Juniper Level Botanic Garden about this plant. And so I included a quote from him. I don't think I've ever seen a plant that attracts more. So not only is it important in the fall when so many other plants have stopped flowering, it attracts a wide diversity of pollinators. It will attract butterflies and moths and bees and wasps and flies and who knows what's else. So if you really want to help pollinators late in the season, this is your plant. I forgot to mention it does spread by runners, so you do want to give it some space. This is not one of your compact plants. And that is plant of the month for November.
Looking ahead to 2025, Lucy's gonna have a talk at Brook Green. We'll have our chapter meeting in January. The 16th is the third Thursday. And our winter seminar, you can go ahead and save this date, February 5th. And this will, of course, be in our next newsletter. So you don't have to think about for 2025 for at least a couple more days or weeks. For our member updates, Dia had shared this request for input for Conway Parks and Recs for those who live in Conway. You can fill out this survey to give input about Conway's parks and suggestions for the future. So write them and tell them to put more native plants in their landscapes. So yes,
That was what I was gonna say.
yeah. And if you need that link afterwards, you can come ask me. All right. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Babs, how many members are we ending 2024 with?
If we count all the members and families that I don't have all the names of, we gotta be over 200 by now.
200. So thank you for being a part of that 200, and we will see you in 2025. So thank you.
Big thanks to our president.